versus the control group where you haven't manipulated the learning styles. So what happens with, again, with the experimental research is that because that there is a difference between what happens in the experimental group and what happens in the control group, you have to say, it's got to be that independent variable. It's got to be the thing that I looked at. It's got to be the thing that I manipulated. Hope that makes sense. We're going to go on to the next slide. So just like I mentioned experimental research, we're also going to discuss correlational research. And the difference between correlations and experimental research is that with correlations, there's no manipulation in the study. And so I don't want you all to get too confused and not too bogged down, again, with the lingo or the jargon, because I'll show you a video that'll have like an independent variable and a dependent variable. But at the same time, when you look at correlations, you don't manipulate anything in that study, but you do have two different variables, okay, that you are trying to find out if they are related. So that's the key thing with correlations. You're looking at a relationship. You're looking at maybe sometimes you'll hear that it's a prediction or those things are associated with each other versus a cause and effect relationship. That's not what you're going to say with a correlation. You can't say that one thing causes something else because, again, there's no manipulation. So you may have heard this phrase, correlation does not mean causation. All we can say is that it means a relationship, all right? Moreover, correlations, which we call the coefficient, is between the numbers of 0 and 1. So 0 is absolutely no correlation. There's nothing in common at all, to 1, which is like perfect, man. So the closer you get to it, the better, okay, to the number 1. And correlations can be one of two things. They can either be positive or negative. And how we judge if a correlation is positive or negative depends on the direction of the correlation, okay? So if they're both going the same direction, doesn't matter if that's up or down. If they're both going in the same direction, then we count that as a positive correlation. If they're going in opposite or inverse directions, then that's a negative correlation, okay? Numbers closer, again, to 1, either negative or positive, that's a tricky one, but either negative or positive shows that there's a stronger relationship, a stronger prediction, a stronger association between two variables. And remember what I said, like variables are things, so variables can be anything. So between two things, okay? All right, so let's go on to the next slide. And hopefully this great little picture is going to give you guys a really good hands-on example of positive and negative correlations. So it's been said that the higher someone's GPA is in high school, that there may be perhaps a prediction of their GPA in college. So their college GPA may be, related to high school GPA. And as you see there, it's going up, right? The same direction. But at the same time, it can be show if you have a lower high school GPA, you may have a lower college GPA. So again, they're going in the same direction. So although it's saying that it's lower, it may be less than, because they're in the same direction, that's a positive correlation. All right, now let's look in contrast to a negative correlation. A negative correlation, again, is going to be two variables going in different directions. Did you like that? Different directions. All right. So perhaps the more absences you have, the lower your exam scores, okay? So that's negative. Again, they're going in two different directions. They may still be related to each other. One thing may be predicting the other, but they're going in two different directions. In the same essence, if you have less absences, you may have higher exam scores, or I may have, or he may have, or she may have. Okay, you get it, right? All right. Let's go on to the next one, which will show the strength of a correlation. So actually, these two pictures were in the Psychology 101 book that's taught here at UNLV, Dr. Whiten. He's a phenomenal professor and a phenomenal writer. And I thought that both of these pictures, that the one you just saw and the one you're looking at now, were great examples in regard to correlation. So, okay, you see the big, huge goose egg in the middle, right? That's 0. That means there's no relationship. And just as Dr. Whiten has so eloquently expressed, the further away you get from 0 and the closer you get to that 1, it doesn't matter if it's negative or positive. it's stronger, all right? It's very cool. And so you see negative 1.00 is perfect. It's as well as a positive 1.00. And the only things that make them negative or positive is the direction of the correlation. So I think we're going to do a hands-on example in a second. So let me just give you a few more pointers and a little bit of an example, and then we'll go through it together, I hope. All right? So let's go on to the next slide. So two variables, again, may be highly correlated, but not causally related. So again, correlation does not mean causation. All you can say is that there's a relationship between two things, that they're related to each other, that there's something going on, that they're associated maybe. So here you go. We have a study that shows a positive correlation between smoking and depression. Okay, but you can't say that smoking causes depression because depression may cause someone to smoke. So all you can say is that, when they're depressed, they smoke. When they're not depressed, they don't smoke. There's a relationship there. But there may be a third variable. There may be something else that's causing this person to smoke. Maybe a relationship is causing them to smoke. Stress is causing them to smoke. Their dog is causing them to be depressed. So we don't know. There may be something else. And since we're not manipulating anything in there, there's no controls going on. We have no idea if one thing causes another. All we can say is that there's a relationship between the two. Okay, so let's go through some hands-on examples. So I have a handy dandy little, can y'all see that? This is like my little magic marker. And so I'm just going to check and make sure that it's working. Woohoo! It is. I have blue screen. See my scribbles? Hi everybody. Cool. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and erase that because this is class time and you probably need to see correlations rather than my scribbles. All right, I like the color blue, so we're going to stick with that one. So let's do an example of a positive correlation. Now, if I asked the class and we were all together and said, okay, class, how do we know that it's positive? I'm just going to imagine that you all are telling me it's in the same direction. And I'd say, oh my God, like I already do, I have the coolest students ever, right? So we're going to show a positive correlation, and positive is directional. So we're going to have two arrows going up. We're also going to have two arrows going down, because it doesn't matter if something is low or high. It's just as long as they're in the same direction, it means that it's a positive correlation, okay? So let's say that the more makeup that I wear, which I was actually putting it on in the studio today, but the more makeup that I wear, the higher my student evals. All right. And we're going to say that that is a 0.9 correlation. But I mean, you can barely get better than that. I mean, you can, because you know 1.0, but that's a pretty strong correlation. So the more makeup I wear, the higher my student evaluations. There seems to be some type of relationship there. So Mac is going to make a lot of money from me this semester because I'm like piling it on. So I have 3 and 7 and 10 thumbs up, like toes and everything, fingers up from my students in regard to my student evaluations. Okay. In the same regard, let's look at something that's lower. Let's say that the less you shop, something that is just a cardinal sin to me, the less you shop, the less you save. Oops, that is a V, okay? So the less you shop, the less you save. Well, we kind of know that doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes, so we're going to put that as a 0.3 correlation, which is kind of low, right? 0.9, that's close to perfect. 0.3, that's our close to 0, right? So saying, hey, the less you shop, the less you save, probably is not right. Probably isn't a good correlation. Probably isn't a relationship between those two things, okay? So, but those are both positive, although it may show less, and although that we have small correlation with the 0.3, and of course the 0.9 kind of makes a little bit more sense. Let's go on and show a negative correlation. So I'm going to erase this board. This is the coolest thing in the world. I know you all wish you had one. All right, we're going to go back to blue, and we're going to do a negative correlation. And I know you remember a negative correlation. Just saw it a few minutes ago, right? there's an inverse relationship. When one goes up, the other goes down, and that's what shows that it's negative. All right, so let's try one. So let's say that the more you study, the less you're going to pay for school, okay? The more you study, the less you'll pay for school. And let's say that's at a negative 0.85. All right, correlation. So we could go around at UNLV and ask people, hey, how often do you study? We can maybe do a Likert scale or just go in the field like we talked about and kind of see people studying and chronicle that and say, hey, people who study more, and then go ask them, how much do you pay? And maybe they say, I pay $100. And people who study 7 hours a week pay $100 on average. And those who study, I don't know, 30 minutes a week pay like $2,000 on average. And we could say, maybe there's a correlation there. Maybe there's a relationship there. And it kind of would make sense, right? Because maybe the more you study, the higher your grades. So out of pocket, you may pay a little bit because you have scholarships or grants, or maybe, you study so much and mom and dad loves you and they're like, you know what, we're going to take care of this bill because you make straight A's. So that would be a negative correlation. Although this is a pretty good situation, the more you study, the less you pay, because there's an inverse. They're going in two different directions. And although that's a negative 0.85, right? You got negative 0.85. Y'all see that? It's still very close to 1. So it's a really, really strong prediction. It's a really strong correlation. So even since we're there, negative 0.85 is actually greater than a positive like 4.5, because this one is close to 0, close to that big, huge goose egg, while the negative 0.85 is closer to a perfect correlation. All right, so let's go on to just show you one more. Let's say just like the slower that you drive, the higher your fines. So the police are coming after you because you are not just obeying the law, you are under the law. I mean, you are the best driver. You're like my grandmother, right? And so the police are coming after you saying, ma'am, sir, I'm sorry, we have to ticket you again. So we can look at that again, and let's give this a 0.02. I mean, that is very, very, very close to 0. It's saying there's no way, excuse me, I forgot my negative. There's no way that this is gonna, there's a relationship there. It's not happening. It's not the slower you drive, the more that you pay in fines, okay? And again, so we have our negatives, and because it's close to that goose egg, it's showing that there's no relationship between these two variables, okay? So let's go ahead and erase that. I love this little thing. I really may have to get one for my office because I think it would be so fun to have this as downtime. All right. So just to reiterate one more time. So if you have a positive or negative, if it's close to 1, I should do that on the other side. Let me erase that, y'all. All right. Point. There we go. So positive or negative, if you have 0.7 and above, just know that that's above, okay? We're normally talking about that's a strong prediction. There's a strong association or a strong correlation. Again, if it's positive or negative, but it's 0.6 or below, those are a little bit of weaker correlations. We're thinking that the relationship is not that strong. Really, if you do between like 5 and 6.5, it's kind of moderate. But if you have 0.7 or above, you're doing great. If you're definitely in the 0.5 or below range, it's a low correlation. And we're saying there's not that much strength between the two variables. So, okay, so I'm finished, y'all. And I just want to thank you so very much for your time.